If anybody has ever wondered how much these completed KSV looms loom packages cost, pull up a chair and let's talk about a little bit of it. All right. What I have in front of me are 3 separate sample invoices with any pertinent client information blacked out. Okay. So I'm going to talk pretty freely about what our loom packages cost back when we were building these high-end motorsport loom packages. All right. We're going to talk about number 1 first. Okay. So the number 1 thing on these loom invoices, and there's really so much that I want to talk with you all about this shit, okay? Because this is an area of the loom packages that you can build the best, most efficient use of your time building, right? You can do, everything's working, wonderful, best quality components, etc. But if you do not bill correctly, okay, when I say bill, I mean invoice your buyer, you're not going to be in business long enough to help people, okay? Or if you are, it's going to take you much, much, much longer to grow at the pace that you should be growing if you're busy, because your invoices to the buyer are not accounting for all of your time and all of the different expenses that encompass what a custom loom package entails. All right, so I'm going to talk about these 3 separate invoices, and if you want a short 4, 5, 7 whatever minute video, this is not the one. Okay, but if you've ever called me or wondered what these really, really nice loom packages cost, this next probably 10 or 15 minutes, this will shed some light on at least what they look like and what the breakdown is for you. This is helpful if you're a buyer of a loom package or if you are a manufacturer or builder of one of these loom packages. The buyers need to be more educated on what's involved with these loom projects, and the providers of the loom packages need to be more educated on how to bill, how to invoice their buyers. Okay, so there is probably a couple days worth of information I could talk about, just on how this, the sales cycle works for having your, loom building business. All right. I've even talked with, a lot of you guys know Paul with Wired by Paul. Okay. I've even talked with him since I moved down here to Stewart. He does these classes where he goes and educates folks on some of the basic information on starting, on how to build looms. We're in talks, hopefully, if we can do a class down here near West Palm, Miami area, something like that, Orlando even, hopefully we can, maybe get together, Paul and myself, to get together and sort of add some information, not just on the building of the looms, but also on how to and when I say building, I mean like the making of the looms, and how, but also how do you run the business part of it, okay? You can build the best looms in the world, but if you're not selling it properly, A, the client experience for the buyer is not going to be as great. B, they're going to say, why is it so much money? Or C, you may say, it's too much money myself as the builder. I'm going to discount my labor. I'm going to give away time. I'm going to give away parts, etc., just because it looks big. And I'm going to show you why these loom packages are so expensive. All right. And now, granted, these invoices here that are in front of me, these are loom packages that are, KSV Looms built some of the nicest loom packages in the entire world. Okay. So not every car needs this type of loom package, but when it comes to what's required and what is the cost of what I see on KSV Looms Instagram, how much does that cost? Because a lot of people just don't know. Okay, so this first invoice I'm going to talk about here, this was for a project, it looks like back in October, about four years ago. Looking at this particular project, just to see what's on here so I can figure out what car I'm talking about, because I've blacked out a bunch of stuff here. This was a hill climb project, it looks like. So we did a lot of different cars for Pikes Peak. And, you know, that was one of the first questions I said whenever folks would call me and say, hey, can you build a wiring harness loom package for the project? You know, the answer was typically yes. But B, the second question was, what is the car doing? You know, who owns it? You know, does the car sleep at someone's house and is just a hobby car, or is this something that typically everywhere the car travels to, it's got people on payroll behind it? And usually the projects that we dealt with, it was option number 2, which is when these cars arrived to wherever they were going, there were trucks and trailers and payroll and hundreds of thousands of dollars invested into these cars. And we had to make sure that our wires worked. Okay? Tons of situations I've seen where folks have run into wiring problems. It's prevalent in a lot of different things. It's one of the reasons how KSV Looms was even born to begin with, 12 years ago. All right, so this invoice here, this is a hill climb invoice. And on these invoices, okay, these invoices are broken down by section, which is what's highlighted here. So we've got subtotal for looms, subtotal for Motec parts. Now on this particular project, it looks like we did sell some of the hardware, in this case a PDM. It looks like a keypad and an NTK dual, along with some pressure sensors. But many times the tuners, okay, when they would bring us into the projects, they were already selling them the hardware. So we would come in and, there were no hardware parts on it primarily. It was loom package stuff, not including hardware. So subtotal for looms, subtotal for Motec parts. In this case, we had to build an ABS loom, which was pretty specialized. Down here, a little lower, these are other project parts, as I would call them. Additional subtotal for additional project parts. In this case, we had to have some custom machine work done for some steering wheel. Any custom work outside here would be listed in this area. And then a subtotal for shipping and a subtotal for documentation and testing, etc. Okay. This other invoice here, this is very similar. Looks like this was another hill climb project. And again, subtotal for looms, all the looms broken out. Subtotal for terminations and additional project parts. So subtotal for terminations, actually I'll talk more in detail about what these sections are. Subtotal for design and programming, and also got to show you guys what the amounts are here. So, okay, so, and next page, again, subtotal for shipping. And then if we go over to this one here, again, subtotal for loom package, subtotal for terminations and battery cable, subtotal for additional project parts, subtotal for design reverse engineering, subtotal for inbound shipping. Looks like this is more shipping, a whole page of shipping, and still some more shipping. All right. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the first invoice here, and let's talk about these categories and what they mean. And I'll show you some numbers here, all right? So subtotal for looms. On these invoices, every loom is itemized. So each one of these part numbers correlated to a piece of yellow heat shrink that labeled every loom on the actual loom. So that way, if you happen to pull this out on all the primary looms, not the terminations, but on all the primary looms, and when I say terminations, I mean like if you had a headlight, we switch connectors, we would receive the headlight from the buyer, change connections, okay, we would call that a termination. But as far as all the primary looms go, these are all going to be labeled on the actual physical loom itself, which correlates to the design sheet and also correlates to the line item here on the invoice. So each of these looms, engine, ECU, left rear, left exhaust, right rear, right exhaust, light pods, cabin front, okay, switch panel, All those are subtotal for looms. So on this particular project, all right, just the looms, $33,147.41. I'll say that one more time. $33,147.41. Now, if we scoot over here to this next section, again, subtotal for Motec parts. These are all just retail prices on Motec at the time. So in this case here, you see that it was only a PDM, the keypad, couple, lambda sensors, 10,000, 98.97. Now in this case here, there's a ABS loom that we had to make. Subtotal, this included a Bosch Motorsports M5 ABS, and we made the ABS loom for it. ABS, another $13,384, so $13,384. Then at the bottom here, we have some miscellaneous project parts. We flip this over. Subtotal for additional project parts, another $4,000. Subtotal for the custom machine work, $23,000. Not much shipping on this one. This project, ironically, we were not in a hurry for, believe it or not. $95, and I'll show you the difference that being in a hurry and not being in a hurry makes on the shipping. And then subtotal for loom testing and documentation. This one was in existing, or we were able to leverage existing design, only 500 some change, just under 6. That is very low because we always did custom one-off project every time, nothing ever the same. So normally you're not going to see that little bit for the design and the documentation. Okay, so total here for this project, $63,782, okay? $63,782, and look, payments and credits, invoice collected.